That November morning in Detroit was colder than usual. John sat in his car in the parking lot of Detroit Memorial Hospital, trying to work up the courage to go inside. Finally, he opened the door and walked to the reception desk. "I have an appointment for John Morrison," he said. He waited for 20 minutes. Then his name was called. The doctor was a young woman reviewing his file. "Please, have a seat," she said. John sat down and clasped his hands on his lap. The doctor looked up and said, "You have colon cancer, Mr. Morrison, and it's quite advanced." John swallowed hard. "How much time do I have?" The doctor hesitated, then said, "About 3 months." When John walked out of the office, the sun was already setting. But there was only one thought in his mind, the mistake he'd made 18 years ago. And that night, when he picked up his phone, no one could have predicted what it would change in his life. The light in the diagnosis room was sharp and cold. As the doctor spoke, John stared out the window at the Detroit skyline. He'd grown up in this city when the factories were still running. Now the factories were closed. He'd grown old, and his body was giving up on him. The doctor handed him some brochures about chemotherapy options and said, "To be honest, it won't change the outcome much." John took the brochures, put them in his pocket, and stood up. He thanked her, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. His feet moved mechanically, while his mind was somewhere else. When he got on the elevator, he saw himself in the mirror, a 69-year-old man with a tired face, gray hair, and eyes filled with fear. When he got in his car, it was 4 o'clock, and the sun had already set, with streetlights beginning to flicker on. He started the engine, but didn't press the gas pedal. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel and breathing. His heart was racing, and his hands were trembling. 3 months, he whispered to himself. 90 days. His 69 years of life flashed before his eyes. His parents, his first job, his marriage, the birth of his son. And then, that night, 18 years ago, the night Michael had yelled at him, the night he slammed the door, the night he never came back, John rested his head on the steering wheel and cried. Alone in his car, in the middle of a parking lot, he cried. John's life had been an ordinary life. He was born and raised in Detroit and started working construction right after school. He was a strong man with calloused hands, broad shoulders, and a powerful voice. At 25, he married Susan, a nurse who was beautiful and kind with brown eyes and a gentle voice that had captivated him. Their wedding was small, with just family and close friends, but they were happy. At 27, Michael was born, a baby with blonde hair and blue eyes. When John first held him, he cried because he had become a father, and there was no greater happiness in the world. As Michael grew up, John taught him everything: how to ride a bike, how to fish, how to fix a car, how to use a hammer. On weekends, they'd go together to Lake Michigan, where they had a small cabin by the water that John's father had built years ago. Michael would put his small hands on his father's hands and say, "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be just like you." John would smile, stroke his son's blonde hair, and say, "You're going to be even better, son, even better." But life moved fast, too fast. Michael started high school, made friends, played basketball, and got a girlfriend. John was working long hours, leaving at 6 in the morning and coming home at 7 in the evening. He'd come home exhausted, watch TV, and fall asleep. Their conversations became less frequent. Susan would say, "Spend some time with your son," but John would reply, "I'm tired, Susan, so tired. We have bills to pay, a mortgage, car payments." Susan understood, but it hurt her. Then it was time for college, and Michael wanted to study art, painting, design, creative things. When John first heard this, he laughed. "Art? You think you can make money with art, Michael?" Michael said, "Money isn't everything, Dad." John became stern and said, "Easy to say, but I'm the one paying the bills." That was their first big fight. Michael cried. Susan tried to mediate, but John wouldn't back down. "You'll study engineering, or you're not getting any money from this house," he said. Michael insisted and applied to art school, and he got it. John stopped talking to him for a whole week. He'd come home, eat dinner, sleep, but wouldn't speak to Michael. Susan was caught in the middle, saying, "Please, John, he's your son." But John would say, "He didn't listen to me. and my word is final in this house." Michael didn't listen either. In September, he packed his bags and went to art school, while John refused to help. Susan tearfully saw their son off, while John stayed home and watched TV. During the first year, Michael called occasionally and talked to Susan, but John wouldn't come to the phone. In the second year, the calls became less frequent. In the third year, Michael graduated and Susan begged, "Please, let's go to his graduation ceremony." John said, "I have to work," but there was no work, just his pride. Susan went alone, and when she came back, she said, "Your son looked so good, John. He was so happy, and he asked about you." John said nothing. Michael moved to New York and became a graphic designer, found a good job, and rented a small apartment. He talked to Susan but not to John, and the years went by. John kept working and coming home exhausted. Then Susan got sick with cancer, and it progressed quickly. John stayed by her side in the hospital, held her hand, and said, "I'm sorry, I worked too much and didn't spend enough time with you." Susan smiled and said, "I know, John. I know you worked for your family." In her final days, she said, "Call Michael. Please call him." John said, "I will," but he never did. When Susan died, Michael came to the funeral and stood next to his father. They both cried, but they didn't speak. They just stood side by side, buried Susan, and went their separate ways. Michael said, "Dad, we need to talk." And John said, "Not now, Michael." Michael asked, "When?" And John said, "I don't know." Michael nodded and left. After that day, they never spoke again. 18 years passed. John retired and lived alone at home, watching TV, chatting with neighbors, and occasionally going fishing. But at night, he was alone in the silent house, without Susan, without Michael. Sometimes he'd pick up the phone and think about calling Michael, but he didn't know what to say. Would he say, "Hello, son. We haven't talked in 18 years, but how are you?" It was too hard, and his pride was too strong, so he'd put the phone down. Then that November came, and the pain in his stomach started. At first it was mild, and he ignored it. But then it got worse, and when he went to the bathroom, he saw blood. He got scared and went to the doctor. Tests were done and he waited. A week later, the results came back. Cancer, colon cancer, advanced stage, spread to the liver. The doctor said, 3 months. John couldn't believe it. "Are you sure?" The doctor nodded and said, "I'm afraid so." Now here he was, sitting in his car as darkness fell and a cold wind blew outside. He picked up his phone and opened his contacts, where it said, "Michael's son." Their last conversation had been 18 years ago. He put his finger on the screen, and it trembled. "What will I say?" he thought. "Will I say, 'Forgive me'? Will I say I'm dying? Will I say I miss you?" Too many words, too many emotions, too many years. He put the phone down because it was too hard, and he went home. That night, he couldn't sleep and just lay in bed staring at the ceiling. It was dark and silent, except for the ticking of the clock. 3 months, he thought. 90 days. Then what? I'll die. Will Michael find out from the newspaper, or will he never know? Thoughts swirled in his head, and he thought about Susan, who had said, "Call him." But he hadn't called. Was it too late now, or was it not? Morning came, and John made coffee, looked out the window, and saw the sun rising and birds singing. It was a normal day, but not for him, because he was dying, and there was something he had to do. He picked up his phone, and this time forced himself not to tremble. He found the number and pressed call. The phone rang once, and his heart raced. Twice, and his throat went dry. 3 times, maybe he wouldn't answer. 4 times, maybe his number had changed. 5 times, then a voice said, "Hello." It was Michael's voice after 18 years, and John's throat tightened so he couldn't speak. "Hello," Michael said again. John swallowed and said, "Michael." His voice was hoarse. "It's your dad." There was silence on the other end, a long silence, and John could hear his own heartbeat. Then Michael spoke. "Dad?" His voice was surprised. "What do you want?" John took a deep breath. "We need to talk," he said. "After 18 years?" Michael's voice was hard. There wasn't a single phone call for 18 years. "And now?" "Yes," John said. I know it's too late. But please, just once, come talk to me." Michael was silent, and John could hear him breathing on the other end. "Why?" Michael asked. "Why now?" John closed his eyes. "Because I don't have much time left," he said. "I'm sick, Michael, very sick." Silence. A long silence. Then Michael said, "What?" His voice had softened. "Cancer," John said. "Colon cancer. Advanced stage. The doctor gave me 3 months. And before I die, I want to talk to you. I want to make peace with you." Michael's breathing changed. "Dad?" he said, but couldn't find the word. John could hear him crying. 3 months? Michael asked. "Yes," John said. 3 months. Maybe less. I don't know. But what I do know is that I don't want to die without making peace with you. Please, Michael. Please come. Michael didn't speak for a long time, then said, "Okay, I'll come. I'll come. This weekend." 3 days later, Michael arrived and John waited for him at the door, standing by the window and watching the street. It was 2 o'clock when a car pulled up, an unfamiliar car, probably a rental. It parked, the engine stopped, the door opened, and Michael got out. He was 42 now, with thinning hair, tired eyes, and slightly slumped shoulders, but he was still his son, John's son. After 18 years, he looked at John, and John looked at him. 2 men in the street, face to face, saying nothing, just look. John saw the child in Michael's eyes, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who used to say, "Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to be just like you." Then John said, "Come in," and his voice was shaking. Michael nodded and walked forward. John opened the door, and Michael stepped inside. The house was small with old furniture and photos on the walls. Michael looked at the photos and saw one of his mother smiling. "Mom," he said. "Yes," John said. "She loved you very much." Michael lowered his head. "I know," he said. They sat down, and John made coffee, his hands trembling as he tried to appear calm. Michael took the coffee and sipped it. "How are you?" John asked, though it was a silly question, but he couldn't think of anything else to say. "I'm fine," Michael said. "How are you?" John shrugged. "Well," he said, "I'm dying." Michael put down his cup. "Is there no treatment?" he asked. "There's chemotherapy," John said, "but the doctor isn't very hopeful. It's too advanced." "I'm sorry," Michael said, his eyes filling with tears. "Me too," John said, "for so many things." Silence. A long silence. Then John spoke. "Michael," he said, "I know it's too late, but we need to talk. 18 years is too long." Michael looked up. "Yes," he said, "too long." John clasped his hands together. "That night," he said, 18 years ago, you wanted to study art, and I opposed it. I was too harsh and too stubborn." "Yes," Michael said. "You were." "I'm sorry," John said, his eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry. I was scared and I wanted the best for you, but I was really just projecting my own fears. If I had studied art, maybe life wouldn't have been easier. But you weren't me. You should have chosen your own path." Michael was crying. "Dad," he said, "I just wanted you to be proud of me, but you never were." John stood up, went to Michael, and took his hand. "I am proud," he said. "I've always been proud, but I couldn't show it, because I was foolish and too proud. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you, son. You chose your own path, and I'm proud of you." Michael stood up, and for the first time in 18 years, father and son embraced. They both cried and held each other for a long time. They kept talking as hours passed, and night fell. John explained why he had acted that way, his fears, insecurities, and what he'd learned from his own father. "My dad was a hard man too," he said, "and I became like him, but it was wrong." Michael shared his pain about how rejected and alone he'd felt, and how much he'd missed his father. "Every birthday, I thought about you," he said. "I waited for you to call." John cried. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." Late that night, John said, "There's a place, the cabin at Lake Michigan. Do you remember?" Michael smiled. "Of course, where we used to fish. We went there every weekend, when I was little." "Should we go there?" John asked. "Just you and me. 2 days. Talk, just like we used to." Michael looked at his father, with tired eyes and a sick body. But there was something there. Hope, maybe, or just longing. He didn't know. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." The next morning, they hit the road in John's old pickup truck. Red, rusty, but still running. Michael got behind the wheel and said, "I'll drive." and John didn't object. He sat in the passenger seat, and they talked the whole way, remembering old times. Michael said, "Remember when I caught that huge fish, and it almost pulled me into the water?" John laughed. "Yes, I grabbed you. That fish was enormous." The drive from Detroit to Michigan took 4 hours, and they listened to music, laughed, and sometimes cried. When they crossed into Michigan, John said, "Here, turn right." They drove down a narrow road, covered by trees, and then the lake appeared. Blue, calm, beautiful, and there was the cabin, a small wooden structure by the water. They got out of the truck and saw that the cabin was old, since John hadn't been there in years. The paint was peeling, and some shingles were missing from the roof, but it was still standing. They went inside where there was dust and cobwebs, but everything was still there, including old photos on the walls, showing Susan smiling, young Michael, and a young, strong John. Michael stopped and looked at a photo. "Mom was so beautiful," he said. "Yes, she was beautiful, and such a good woman. I was a lucky man, but I didn't appreciate her enough." "She loved you," Michael said. "I know," John said, "and I loved her too, but I couldn't show it, just like I couldn't show my love for you." Michael turned to his father. "You're showing it now," he said. That first evening, they sat by the lake, lit a fire, and fished just like they used to. Their lines hung in the water as the sun set in peaceful silence. Then John spoke. "Michael," he said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me because I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that my biggest regret in life is fighting with you and not making peace. Because of my pride, we lost 18 years, and that's my fault." Michael looked at his father. "Dad," he said, "I forgave you a long time ago. I was angry and hurt, but then I understood that you're human, and you made mistakes, and I made mistakes too, by not talking to you and staying away. Maybe I was too proud as well." John turned to him. "You really forgave me?" he asked. "Really," Michael said. "You were my father. You've always been my father, and I love you." John cried, there by the lake at 69 years old, with his son. "I love you too, son," he said. "I always have." That night, they slept side by side in the cabin for the first time in 18 years. John couldn't sleep, and just lay there, listening to Michael breathe. His son was here, beside him, and had forgiven him and loved him. John felt something inside, a lightness, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He didn't know why, but he felt it. They woke up early the next day, made coffee, and sat by the lake as the sun rose and birds sang. "This place is so beautiful," Michael said. "Why didn't you come here for years?" "I don't know," John said. "Maybe it hurt too much without your mother and without you. Maybe I was running away." "But you're here now," Michael said. "Yes," John said. "I'm here now, and so are you." They talked all day long, as Michael told his father about New York, his work, his life, and his friends. John listened, really listened, and asked questions and showed interest. "Can I come visit sometime?" he asked. Michael smiled. "Of course, I'd love that." In the afternoon, they fished and Michael caught one. Not big, but nice. "Just like old times," he said. John smiled. "Yes, just like old times." That evening, they sat by the fire under the star. "Michael," John said, "you know, the doctor gave me 3 months, but now, I feel different, lighter, more at peace." Michael looked at him. "Good," he said, and didn't say anything else. They both sat there quietly. When they returned home, John felt different. Physically, he was still sick, but something had changed. He didn't quite know what it was. He just felt it. Michael started coming every week, flying in from Detroit on Friday evenings and leaving Sunday evenings. They'd eat together, watch TV, talk, and sometimes go to the cabin. John was getting sicker, losing weight, and growing weaker, but something was different. "I have my son," he'd tell the neighbors. "My son comes every week." We made peace. 3 months passed, and John went in for a checkup. The doctor ran tests, blood work and imaging, and said, "The results will be back in a week." John waited, and so did Michael. The week crawled by slowly. Then the phone rang. "Mr. Morrison, please come in for a consultation," the doctor said. John went, and Michael came with him. They walked into the doctor's office, together, where the doctor sat at her desk, looking at the screen. She looked up and smiled. "Please, sit down," she said. They sat down, and Michael held his father's hand. "Mr. Morrison," the doctor said, "the results are interesting." "What do you mean?" John asked. 3 months ago, I told you that you had 3 months to live," the doctor said. "The tumor was very large and had spread to your liver." "Yes," John said, "I remember, But now, the doctor said, turning to the screen, now the results are different. The tumor has shrunk, significantly shrunk. The lesions on your liver have decreased. John couldn't believe it. What? He said. Michael squeezed his father's hand tightly. Really? He asked. Yes, the doctor said. You didn't have chemotherapy or any treatment. But the results are different. How did this happen? John asked. The doctor shrugged. Sometimes it happens, she said. Rarely, but it does. We'll keep monitoring. John looked at Michael, who was smiling and crying. Dad, he said. John went back to his car, sat down, and thought about Michael, the lake, their conversations, and those days. What had happened? He didn't know, but something had. Months passed, and John continued going for checkups with tests every month. The doctors were amazed. Unexpected, they said. John listened, but didn't ask questions. A year later, John and Michael were at the cabin by Lake Michigan, fishing as the sun rose. John was 70 now, with white hair, but his eyes were bright, and he was alive. You know, he said to Michael, the doctor gave me 3 months. Michael looked at him quietly. I know, he said. The sun was rising, and the lake was shimmering. 2 men sat side by side, father and son. They were still here.